What keeps us from believing God and His Word? One thing is that we project our limitations and restrictions upon God, who is not bound by time, logic, natural physical laws as we are. So sure, from our vantage point, it may not make sense or is impossible, but we need to start looking at things from God's perspective, because through Him, all things are possible. So let's take a look at some examples of this in the Bible. So let's go to Jericho, for example, in Joshua chapter 6. Now, the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went in and no one went out. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its kings and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the Ark of the Covenant. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go up and everyone straight in." So imagine this scene for a second. You are in an army and you're about to go battle a very strong and fortified enemy, and your marching orders are, well, just that, march. God's grand plan to defeat the opposing army is to march around them and blow trumpets. Now, obviously, this is not a very strategic or tactical plan of attack, but at the same time, that's kind of the point. Do you trust that God will do what He said, even though you may not see how it will all work out in the end? And of course, if you're familiar with the story of Joshua and the Battle of Jericho, you know that that's what they did. They walked around the walls of Jericho once every day for 6 days. On the 7th day, they did it 7 times, and they blew the trumpets and they gave a great shout, and just as God said, the walls came a-tumbling down. Let's take a look at another example. This time, let's go to the New Testament in Luke 5. One day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, the people were crowding around Him and listening to the Word of God. He saw at the water's edge 2 boats. They were left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and he asked him to put out a little from the shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from within the boat. When he finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down the nets for a catch." But Simon answered, "Master, we have worked all night and have caught nothing. But because you have said so, I will let down my nets." So let me just pause here and interject a little bit. So Peter is a fisherman. That's his trade, his career for years. He knows how to do his job. He knows how to fish, the best time to fish, the best place to fish. You know what Jesus does for his day job? He was a carpenter. What a carpenter know about fishing? How he gonna tell Peter how to do his job, and at that, give him bad advice while doing so? Any experienced fisherman at that time knew the best time to fish was at night and in the shallow waters. But here Jesus is asking him to do the exact opposite, to go into the deep waters in the middle of the day. Sometimes what blinds us isn't that we can't see how things will work out, like in the previous example, in the previous story, but rather we have seen it work before and therefore try to stick to what makes sense and what has worked for other people or what has worked in the past. And we may inadvertently completely ignore God's instructions or His visions because we're trying so hard to logic our way into it. Continuing with the story, When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled to their partners to come from the other boats to come help them, and they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. So again, the question boils down to, do you trust that God will do what He said, even though you may not see how it will all work out? So I think from here stems our doubts, fears, and unbelief. If we don't want them to take root, we must begin viewing things as God does and walking by that vision and faith, not by sight. Our sight is limited. God's is unlimited. He has the panoramic view, the God's eye view, if you will. He sees the end from the beginning. So when we walk by faith, we are trusting that God, who sees all, will guide our steps. It's like a blind person being led by a seeing eye dog. They're putting their trust and faith in this dog to lead them down the right path. In the same way, though our sight is limited, we put our faith in our all-seeing guide, God, to lead us down the right path in our lives. So essentially, to walk by faith and not by sight means to follow God and trust that though you may not see how this will all work out in the end, God does. And you are walking by His sight and not your own. As always, think on these things.